Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I do not have my co-host Alan Huntsberger in the studio with me today, but that's okay. We're going to continue on with the show. We're going to start with our foundational verse, the earth and everything in it. The world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord, for he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. That's our foundational verse. We say it every single day because it's true. It makes it so that you've got people coming in telling you what to do, how to live your life. But you know what? We're all equal. We're all on this planet together. We all need to work with one another. God created everything. He owns it. So let's be respectful to one another. We've got Glenn Blackett. Glenn, welcome to the show. We got Roger Song. Roger, welcome back.
Thank you.
Roger, someone who's not respecting you and your beliefs is the Alberta Law Society, and you've been going through court and legal proceedings with them. Why don't you give people who are brand new to the show that aren't familiar with your case a little background of why you're here and about what happened to you?
Thank you, Corey, to give us the opportunity to update. On the May 6th, my counsel, Glenn Blackett, and I appeared in the Alberta's Court of Appeals bench in Calgary to present our case and ask of the court to stop the Law Society's violation of the Constitution and the rule of law. So this case is really about the Constitution, the foundation of Canada, and the rule of law. And I believe that what makes Canada a great and free country is the Constitution, on which Canada is built upon, including its foundation, which is the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And in the common law, I think the reference to God is very clearly to the Lord, which is the creator of the universe, which is Lord Jesus Christ. It's not, reference to a Muslim God or, Asia Buddha. It's very clear. So what is God? God is love, basically. So what is love? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not keep record of wrongdoing. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. So it appears to me that in Canada, as proclaimed by its constitution, love is the core value of the culture of Canada. But I think in Law Society over the last several years, they are appearing to propose a new agenda to basically replace the foundation of Canada, which is the supremacy of God and rule of law, with a different notion, which is called the cultural competence of EDI. So since 2019, the Law Society has taken a series of steps to promote this new requirement of cultural competence. First of all, 2019, they announced their strategic plan, which include several ideas and notions which were not included in the history of the bar of Alberta over the last 100 years. One is called proactive regulation. The other is called the extension of competence to the cultural competence, which they acknowledge that is the non-traditional area of competence. And also, they include the promotion of DEI as their strategic goal. And then associated with that, the Law Society also announced its strategic regulatory objectives. The thing that concerns me is that Law Society suddenly declared that if two or more of their regulatory objectives conflict with one another, the Law Society reserves the power to decide which objective they are going to achieve. For instance, if there's an conflict between the objective of the rule of law and the objective of the promotion of EDI, Law Society say they have the power to make a decision to promote EDI at the expense of the rule of law. And after that, the Law Society also made the land first Indigenous land acknowledgement in 2003, 2002, and also posted a statement that about the systemic discrimination of the legal system of Canada on their website. Law Society announced that they're going to impose this mandatory culture training program on all the lawyers of Alberta, starting with the program on First Nation issue called the PATH. And then after that, Law Society amended the rules of the Law Society to basically grant themselves the power to impose this type of cultural competence training. And then after that, Law Society also announced to the bar of the Alberta the professional development profile, which include two domains. One is called the cultural competence of EDI. The other is called the truth and reconciliation. And because of those, and there's some other, like they amended the code of conduct to impose these, rules on the discrimination and harassment, which include very subjective, material criteria, and it's very uncertain to determine what is exactly a harassment and and the discrimination. So because of this, this kind of a violation of the rule of law, and also the indoctrination engaged by the regulator, in January 2023, 50 lawyers signed a petition under Section 28.1 of the Legal Profession Act to require Law Society to convene a special meeting of the bar to debate and pass a resolution to revoke that rule, which is 67.4, giving the Law Society the power to impose the mandatory cultural training programs. And that effort failed because at the special meeting of the more than 3,000 lawyers attending the meeting, more than 2,000 lawyers voted against the resolution, but still there more than 800 lawyers voted in favor of the resolution to repeal this rule. And thereafter, in July 2023, 70 lawyers and professionals, including the professionals and lawyers from Alberta and cross country, including the Ontario, BC, and other provinces, wrote a letter to Law Society, also to our Premier Daniel Smith and Minister of Justice, raising our concern on this dangerous movement of the Law Society into the territory of imposing cultural competence requirement and engaging political agendas. After that, we receive a fairly responsible comments and reply from the Minister of Justice. But I only received a letter from the Law Society with one sentence saying, "Thanks very much, we received your letter." That's it. So that left us really have no other venue. So other than we have to go to the court to ask the court to make a decision. So in October 2023, I filed my judicial review application under the representation of my counsel, Glenn Blackett. And so we have to wait for more than another year. And finally, this month, May 6th, we appear in the Court of Queen's Bench to make our submissions. And also, I think the other thing I want to add that last year, October, the Alberta government launched a review of all the regulators of Alberta province. And our Premier also made comments that it is not appropriate to compel Albertans to accept any prescribed version of truth. So the always 1984 fiction should remain fiction in Alberta. So, but I think against that background, I wrote to Alberta's Law Society again, October last year, saying we appreciate the initiative of the government, but we haven't received any response from the Law Society regarding our letter of July 2023, and we request a responsible reply from the Law Society of Alberta, and also we appreciate the opportunity to have a dialogue and conversation with Law Society so that our concerns can be discussed and communicated to Law Society. And Law Society's response is that now since you have sued us, we're in court, so we will not engage any further conversation with you. See you guys in the court. So that's then for the rest, I will leave my counsel Glenn Blackett.
I mean, this sounds like a movie. You've got the lawyer hiring another lawyer to take a bunch of other lawyers to court and to sue them. I mean, it's just fascinating. Roger, one thing you didn't mention, and I just wanted to get it for the new people before we go on to you, Glenn, is the reason why you're so against DEI. That has to do with your background coming from China and the communist country. You've seen the propaganda and the brainwashing that they do, and you've recognized it with this, whatever it is they make you do. Take a course, I don't know what it is, watch videos, sign a pledge of allegiance to the whatever DEI God. I don't know what they make you do, but is that not correct? It is really because not only your just Christianity, but it also has to do with your Chinese communist understanding, and you see it inside the DEI, correct?
I'm an immigrant from mainland China 25 years ago, right? So in China, we have, when I received all my education in China from primary school all the way to my law school in China, we have this requirement called political competence. By political competence, we mean you have to unconditionally support everything that the party tells you to believe. Otherwise, you're not politically competent. Political competence also means that you have unconditionally support the leadership, the power of the Communist Party. So when I received this email from the Law Society say, we're going to engage this cultural competence training, that really worries me, because to me, that's another version of the political competence requirement. Also, Law Society, during their pleadings, they also repeatedly emphasize the power that they have, which is to regulate the profession in the public interest. And also the concept of public interest also has a parallel in China, which is called the interest of people, right? In China, everything that is done by the Communist Party is under the name of the people. Hundreds of thousands of landlords were executed in the interest of the people. Private properties, lands were expropriated by the government, by the party of the Communist Party, for the interest of the people. Thousands of intellectuals, professors, students are forced to the re-education camp, also in the interest of the people. So when I look at the Law Society's agenda, they're saying they have the power to, promote the public interest, even if at the expense of the rule of law. That really worries me, because if you don't have the rule of law, if you don't have the principles that recognize the supremacy of God, right? What you have is exactly the opposite. That's the seriousness of this case.
Yeah. We're going to get on to Glenn. Glenn, I think this is like a movie in the making. Tom Cruise could play your role. We'll call it The Firm too, because this is really kind of something that's fascinating and disappointing. We have lots of lawyers on the show. Many of the lawyers have gone through the process, and did the requirements, but none of them liked it. None of them agree with it. You know what I mean? You just kind of like, just pass it on. When I hear Roger talk, I'm hearing this is a systemic problem. Like, this is not just like a little course you take and move on. This is like deep, mental propaganda heading somewhere situation that's not good, and it's why he's taking the stance. Glenn, I wanted to talk to you how you took on this case. Why? Why did you decide to like take this on?
Well, probably to just go back to your last point there that, I think a lot of people look at this stuff, a lot of lawyers look at this stuff and they think, it's kind of window dressing. It's not, nobody's really taking it that seriously. It doesn't matter if it's kind of a little bit hokey, whatever. But if you really look at the substance of DEI, it's clearly and expressly hostile to our Constitution. So every tenant of DEI is hostile to a tenant of the Canadian Constitution. So, for example, at base, Roger talks about our Constitution is animated by love. I might translate that into legal speak as our Constitution is animated by a sense of the dignity of the individual. That each person has equal and inherent value, and each person has the ability the agency to make changes in their life. That's a core fundamental tenet of the Constitution, which maybe people don't appreciate, but DEI does not hold that to be true. DEI holds to be true, in fact, the opposite, that people are effectively just products of oppressive hierarchies, powerless against those oppressive hierarchies. Down the shopping list of Canadian constitutional principles, equality before the law, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and I think maybe most fundamentally, reason and objectivity. Our Constitution operates by the rule of law, which means that you have one rule that everyone can conceivably understand the same, and it applies to everyone the same. DEI says, no, there's really no such thing as the real world. And I mean, that sounds kooky to say, but that's just a matter of fact. There's no such thing as the real world. We can never really agree on anything, except if we're all, identical. Like if we're in a group where we're black people, for example, okay, maybe we can agree on certain things, but if we're white people, we're not going to be able to see or agree on those things. Anyway, it's racial segregation. It's just from top to bottom, DEI violates the Constitution. And 10,000 lawyers in Alberta, when they became lawyers, the first thing that they did before they could become lawyers is swear an oath of loyalty to the Constitution and loyalty to the client. And this DEI program at the Law Society of Alberta and throughout the legal system, the court is weighing into this area as well. Both in court programs and also in case law. They're getting into this kind of DEI area. That program really violates our oaths to the Constitution and to our clients. And so, I just don't think that you can, you either don't take this stuff seriously, in which case it has no place in the law. If it's just a joke that we're not supposed to be paying attention to, then get it out of the law. If we are supposed to be taking it seriously, as presumably we are, right? Then we have to recognize that it's directly hostile to the Constitution, and sworn defenders of the Constitution, we all have to do something about it. So I'm part of that.
I love that. And what you said, the rule of law, it seems though that the rule of law is for thee, but not for me. You know what I mean? The politicians, the elites, the government, they've been breaking the law day after day after day after day. No one's ever held accountable. You know what I mean? But everybody else is, and so that doesn't work. You guys just went to court, which is like, this has been a couple years now. I think you've been waiting for this chance. Can you tell us what happened?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that happened, and I can't entirely unpack why it's so interesting to me, but I think it's very revealing. We put together a 200 page brief, which is enormous for a file like this, where we tried to explain how this DEI program does not interface happily with the Constitution at all. We effectively said that the Law Society has adopted this political objective, which is wrong in form. They're not allowed to have any political objectives, that they're pushing on lawyers, and that the political objective they have is directly hostile to the Constitution, which is an outrageous kind of an accusation. I always say either I'm a lunatic in which case I'm a problem here. Or what I'm saying is true, but it can't be both. So which is it? And what I find most amazing is that the Law Society, in their written argument and in their argument before the court, completely ignored that issue. Just didn't want to talk about it. They said that, which is, I mean, I understand why they want to avoid it, but it seemed quite brash, or not brash, quite brave to take that position. But they basically said that that the court has no legitimacy or capacity when reviewing the legality of their conduct to look into what their politics are. They said basically the analogy I used is they've put that in a black box. They've labeled those politics something that they call competence, and they've invited the court to just ignore what politics they've decided to adopt, or that they've decided to adopt politics at all. So, and I think that's really revealing. It's revealing to me that instead of an animated, spirited defense of their program to say, what are you talking about? This is all about competence. Let us demonstrate to you how this is about competence. Instead, they just whistle past the graveyard and let's just not talk about it. So that was amazing to me. I'll be curious to know if the court takes the same position. It's the same position the Law Society has taken throughout this entire adventure. When Roger brought a petition to gather together all of the members of the bar, the Law Society put out a statement where they said, you should vote against this motion to get rid of cultural competency training for the following reasons. And they didn't get into what they really mean by competence in that document. They would not circulate to the bar our position statement to demonstrate what problems we thought there was with that. So unfortunately, the meeting was not an informed meeting. When we wrote to the minister, the Law Society wrote back. We had about a 10-page letter explaining the problem. It was signed by about 70 lawyers, a number of other professionals. And the Law Society wrote back after a couple days and said, I think all told, thank you for sharing that in the way you have, period. Just nothing. No response at all.
Tone deaf, totally tone deaf.
Well, I mean, yeah, except for the fact that it works fine. So, I mean, maybe it is the right tone. But yeah, so it's just been there's no dialogue. There's no willingness to engage the issue. And the question becomes, fine, why are you unwilling to engage that issue? If you really think the DEI is a great idea for the Law Society and a great idea for lawyers, then defend it. Defend it in court. And if you're not going to defend it, in my mind, you're saying there's something wrong here and we don't want to talk about it because we know there's something seriously wrong. Yeah. And I hope that the court picks up on that. I don't know if the court will. I can tell you that it's a little hard to tell in court how things are going, I guess. I like to be asked questions. So there was a lot of questions. That's a good thing. I didn't love I'd say the general tenor of the room. One thing that really stands out in my mind was the Law Society has expressly forbidden certain expression under a code of conduct. So we have a code of ethics, basically, as lawyers, that if we violate that code of ethics, we can get disbarred or we can get sanctioned. It says things like you can't have a conflict of interest, you can't take on a file where you're incompetent, you can't blah, blah, blah. One of the things you can't do is harass or discriminate, which is a series of expressions, right? Harassment is me saying something to you that makes you upset. Me discriminating against you may be me saying something which is racially motivated or whatever. But it's a number of specific prescriptions against things you can say. The Law Society, in their brief, said they said it is impossible, difficult, if not impossible, to imagine how that could constitute a breach of your freedom of expression. An express, sanctionable prohibition on speech, the Law Society could not imagine how that could be a violation of your freedom of expression, which, to me, it's kind of hilarious. But when I said that in court and I said, come on, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's an express prohibition on expression. That's pretty easy to imagine why that would be a violation. I said, the only kind of expression which is not protected under Section 2B, which is the section of the Charter that protects your freedom of expression, is violence. Insofar, I think that's about right. That, okay, you could say taking out a knife and stabbing someone is some kind of an expression. The court said that's the kind of expression which is not going to be protected under 2B. Fine, that's fine. And I said to Justice Couture that that's the only kind of expression that isn't protected under 2B. And she came to the defense of the Law Society's position, effectively, that it was unimaginable to see a freedom of expression breach because she said, oh no, the definition of violence, i.e. the kinds of expression which are not even protected under the Charter, has become much broader lately. Case law has broadened that significantly, which is like, kind of a scary comment from my perspective. But
so we got like 30 seconds left. When do you get a decision? How long do you have to wait now? Do you have to wait another year?
Who knows? I mean, I don't think responsibly we couldn't get a decision within maybe a couple of months. I think there's a lot of material and thinking to do to produce a decision. So I would expect something between 2 months and maybe as late as a year. I hope it doesn't go that long, but it'd be somewhere in that window. I'd say the longer it takes, probably the better, because that demonstrates that the justice is really grappling with the issues that she needs to grapple with, rather than having accepted the Law Society's invitation to review the legality of their conduct without actually thinking about it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate having you on. Thank you so much for the update. We're going to definitely have you back to have more of these discussions, because I think this reveals a lot. When you go through this process, you start to see behind the curtain, you know what I mean? And that they don't really believe in the DEI, but they're not going to budge on it, kind of a deal. Yeah. So I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for all that you're doing. We're going to have you back. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Corey.
If you'd like to help support our mission, keep this kind of conversation and truth on the air, we are viewer supported. We don't take government funds or interest groups or lobbyists. It's just because of the generosity of you, our viewer. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate. Many different ways you can give digitally. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. You can make the check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association. Send to 246 Stewart Green, Southwest Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H 3C8. And if you'd like prayer, you can call our toll-free number, 1-800-915-0056 in Canada. I laugh because it's like, mail strike, no mail strike, mail strike, no mail strike. Anyway. We're out of time. We'll see you guys later. And in the words of Alan Huntsberger, love you.